Howdy, all you delicious people. I'm here today to review Malignant. So, I went on HBO Max and finally watched this movie. I don't know, it seems like this movie has some staying power. It seems like people are interested in this film. Like, I thought that it would have been like a thing that just went out and then no one cared. But it seems like people continue to be interested in this film, so I just decided, heck, let's finally watch this film. So, I ended up watching this movie. It's an hour and 51 minutes. I think I even started to watch part of a review of this movie, and all of a sudden you have a person that's kind of talking about camera angles and a lot of other stuff, and I'm just like, did you just watch the trailer? Just trailer for you? Hey, people want to eventually just try and desperately put out a review of something they didn't watch any second of something, which that's fine, because you get a lot of people that are like that. Hence why I just avoid watching other people's reviews for the most point. Because a lot of them just, it feels just like they watched the trailer. So, going in here for this film, I would say that this movie is okay enough to watch. Like, barely an okay film. Just because for me, I've seen things like Stephen King's The Dark Half, which is a much better film than this is. I've seen movies similar to this, but if I were to probably say them, like, it's not the exact same thing. Like checking out Jean-Claude Van Damme's Replicant, which is kind of similar to this, but like it's not exactly. It's kind of in the same vein. But yeah, so here's the thing. Within like the first like 30 to 40 some odd minutes of this movie, I easily figured out what was going on completely in this film. And this movie is an hour and 50 some odd minutes. So immediately once we get hit with a certain kind of scene, I'm like, oh, I figured it out. Then they're like, oh no, you didn't figure it out. Let me keep spoon feeding you information to make you like really just say that you're just like. Once they started like trying to continue to spoon feed me information, I was like, hey, my phone is really interesting right now. Wow, my phone. Oh, yeah, my phone. Because I'm like, no, I already know what's going on. Thank you, movie, for wanting to think that like I have no clue what's going on in this movie. And really, I'm like, this movie is long, because you already know what's going on. You figure out fairly easy what's going on, because in the very early stages of this movie, like the very early minutes of this film, I was just like, okay, this feels random. Okay, like why do we transition to this home? This feels again random. But then eventually, within several more minutes of these bizarrish scenes that I'm just trying to figure out like how they're all connected, and then boom, as soon as we get to like roughly about 40 minutes in, I'm just like, okay, gotcha, thanks. Like, cause I was like, this movie starts out so random. But also, there's this one song that they are consistently siphon in to be, like, I don't know if it's, like, the scary music that they're trying to siphon in here or whatever, but every time that this scary music gets siphoned in, every single time I hear that, I think that that is a song from Fight Club where both Edward Norton's character and the girl is to eventually see all the buildings blow up at the end of Fight Club, where Edward Norton turns to the girl and he's like, "You've caught me at a very strange time in my life," and then all of a sudden they're like, Wow. Wow. Like that, like you could go at the very end of Fight Club by the time that those buildings are blowing up and hear that song and then match it up to the song that's going on in this Malignant movie and just be like, I hope whoever originally did that song is going to sue the crap out of this, whatever this is in this movie in Malignant. Because I would just be like, dude, this song sounds exactly alike to that song without there being lyrics in there. It's just some weird wow. Like it's freaking just like that other song. So I'd be suing the F out of these people. Or I would just say, hey man, give me some credit from this movie and give me some fat cash too, because freaking this part of this song was used in that film. Obviously, it sounds the exact same. Like I'm just waiting for the lyrics to chime in from the Fight Club movie because I hear that throughout the Fight Club movie a lot. So hopefully somebody gets sued because that sounds the exact same in that movie. If you go and you watch the end of Fight Club and then you come into this movie, you'll be like, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Or if you've seen Fight Club, you'll know what I'm talking about because... Anyways, pushing on. So, what is the teeing up version of this movie? Well, I don't even know how I can tee this movie up. It's so goofy and so weird. Because eventually it seems to have some rational thing where I'm just like I'm trying to heavily justify everything that's going on in this movie as like a rational thing. And just thinking, like, maybe this is some kind of Carrie scenario, or maybe this is some kind of, this person just has a, yeah, I don't think I can say that. Maybe this girl has a ghost that bizarrely is to be her protector. But then immediately I'm just like, okay, this is going too goofy, so I have to come up with the goofiest explanation of all. And because they go into things like a make-believe friend, then eventually they go into eventually the big reveal, which I was like, God, that's just too goofy. Like, this is like freaking, God. Total Recall, if anybody's seen the original Arnold Schwarzenegger, well, maybe even the more current one, but no, like, let's go with the original Arnold Schwarzenegger Total Recall. It's like that. It's like that. Just, like, basically, if you've seen Total Recall, eventually you'll go into this movie and eventually figure out what I mean by that. And if you've already seen this movie, you'll be like, oh, yeah, it's like Total Recall. If you've never seen Total Recall, then sorry, you've missed out on a really good movie. Especially the Arnold one. Don't watch the Colin Farrell one. Well, you could probably still watch that one. It's okay. But anyways, so... And if people don't know what Total Recall means, then... that's a big part of the surprise of it all. But anyways, pushing on. So this movie is a kind of a slasher movie that we have a guy that has this vendetta against all these people that have wronged him in his life. And we eventually find out that Madison is along for the ride. Consistently having been thrusted in these scenarios that are with this killer who is to be called Gabriel. Eventually, we slowly but surely start to find out what's going on within this movie. Because this guy is to continue to kill people in a very circus performer-like way, but there's a whole reason for that. And because this person can't just kill a guy or a woman or whoever normally. No. Like, this guy has to weirdly just, like, go in this circus performer like way of bizarrely killing people with this weird, goofy award that he is to adjust to make it his knife. That I'm just like... So we're still, with a slasher film, we're still doing knife, but it has to be this unique looking knife that this character has to find and then fine tune it to eventually be this, oh, look at this knife. Oh, look at how unique it is. And I'm just like, God, that's so random. Like, you couldn't have had this character have a weapon that's been, like, his thing for I don't know how long, and then coincidentally, he ends up finding another one of these through killing people, and then that's the weapon that he uses. Like, that's his, like, his thing. Because eventually you should see some kind of old footage of this guy, let's just say, using this same weapon in some other clip. But then eventually he refines that same kind of weapon again. And it's like, aha, this is mine. This is the one I'm going to use again. That's different, but looks just like my old weapon. But instead, we have to come up with this goofy weapon out of nowhere because slasher movies have to try to do something drastically different. Whatever. It's like, it's a goofy slasher movie. Let's get into double five time territory. Let's get into spoilers. Let's goof this movie out because it's about that time to otherwise say it is spoiler time. It's spoiler time. It's about that time we to spoil this movie. So, very beginning of this movie, we just have bizarrely this insane asylum. Yeah, that made a lot of sense to me too. Like, we have all of a sudden this insane asylum where supposedly this Gabriel character has killed numerous people, which we can't really see much of anything because we're not supposed to. So Gabriel is going off and killing people. We're kind of seeing like either off-screen deaths or we're just seeing like people getting mangled through a doorway, which I'm just like, God, that is so just, oh my God, that is just the stupidest thing. You can't even show what the killer looks like in the beginning part of this movie. That is to already tell me something already. So, and they never show him. They never show him in the beginning sequence. So it's already just like, well, that has a very limited conclusion that I could be making. So we have this doctor who is Dr. Florence Weaver, I believe. Let me make sure that I have, yeah. Dr. Florence Weaver. It seems like her people that she works under, have an inability to tranquilize Gabriel. And so Dr. Florence is to go upon herself and tranquilize this thing and take it down. And so now we just see Dr. Florence and her guards dragging whatever this thing is because you still can't see it. And so Dr. Dr. Weaver is to mention, like, you know what, I think it's time that we need to cut out the cancer. We need to cut out the illness that is to hurt this person. And so now we need to do that. So we also see this thing dragged, and all we see is its feet, and we have these weird panda socks. Excuse me. Which I'm like, okay. like, does the killer have a bizarrish sense of humor? Does the killer, like, wear cute clothes. Again, that narrows down a lot also. And I'm just like, what's up with the panda socks? What's up with this? So all of a sudden we stop from that scene to just push on to present day. I'm like, wait a minute. I didn't even get to see what this thing was. Whatever this monster is that I think is eating people, or whatever it's doing. Let me pause here also for a second. So, we just push on to present day. Like, anything that we were to see before was just like... What was that? So, now we have present day where all of a sudden we have this husband and wife where I want to try to find the guy's name, so this will be much easier. I know him from Supernatural. I've seen him in the movie, or the show Supernatural, and so I'm trying to find him, but it's really difficult. So, yeah, that's great. Derek, there we go. So Derek is to be this man of the house, and so our main character, who's to be Madison, is to be pregnant. It seems that Madison has had a large number of miscarriages, supposedly, and we assume that possibly the miscarriages were honestly coming from Derek, because Derek seems to be a person that is aggressive, let's just say, with his woman. To where we actually see in the scene where Derek is all of a sudden going and pushing his wife's head with his hand into this wall, and all of a sudden the back of her head is starting to bleed. And so Derek is like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Hey, like, let me go and let me try to like help you with like your head. Your head's bleeding." And so Derek goes off, and Madison decides that she's going to lock the door. And when Derek like returns, Derek's like, "Oh, Madison, like, come on, like, you know I didn't mean to." And so we just have the two separate, and eventually Derek goes back into the normal mode of just kind of going and sitting in front of the TV and just kind of like drinking beer and whatever the heck that he would do. So all of a sudden we like seem to like have these like power outages, and so there's to also be like times where doors are to seemingly open, or so we all of a sudden have Derek, who is starting to check things out and trying to check out sounds and trying to like go through his house. Like, we have at one point where his like refrigerator door opens, and so he closes it. Seems like there's just like things that open and close or whatever that deal with electricity for some reason. I don't know what it is, but it seems that Gabriel has this electrical power of sorts that is to either just start to flicker lights, or he actually just goes and talks bizarrely through the radio, because he himself doesn't have a actual, for most of this movie, actually have a mouth to talk out of, seemingly, because we don't actually showcase that. We just really see him talking seemingly through a radio until the real end of this movie, where Gabriel is actually talking. So eventually what ends up happening is Derek is to go back into his living room because he sees channels being changed, or he hears channels being changed consistently. So Derek goes in there to see like a person on his couch, and channels are being changed. And ooh, that should probably scare a lot of people, right? She's like, "Oh, what's gonna go on?" So all of a sudden the lights all turn off, and then they turn back on, and then all of a sudden this guy is to be gone. Oh, Kalidokli? Like, we're gonna get some action here? And action we do. So, like, this ghost has played with Derek long enough, and so what ends up happening is Derek ends up going and getting his neck broken, and then eventually Madison, who is to have kind of like slept things off, had decided, hey, yeah, like, I guess I'll go down and see what's what. Like, I'll go and see what's going on. To all of a sudden see that her husband is to be killed. And so she ends up calling the police, and they end up kind of hauling his body away. And so we have immediately, like, Detective Shaw, who's on the case, who's just like, you know what? We're probably thinking that this could quite obviously be the wife, because that makes a lot of sense. There was no one else home, there was no real signs of forced entry, and who would go and try to steal anything from these people? So probably has to be the wife. That probably makes the most sense. So instead of booking this woman right away, what ends up happening is they basically just treat Derek's case like seemingly some cold case, where they really don't do anything with it until the next murder is to arrive, and then maybe they're thinking maybe there's a connection between all these murders, and hey, like, that could be it. So so the next person who is to get collected, collected because she's not to be really killed. So we have a woman who is to work at this this creamery company or something like that. I couldn't quite 100% make out the sign. I want to say it's like Cold Stone Creamery or something like that, but that sounds like an ice cream company. So we have this woman who is to do these tours and is to, like, mention, like, oh, like, like, this place could be haunted, oh no. And coincidentally, as she was to say that, all of a sudden the lights were to flicker, and so this girl, who is, I believe her name is Serena, from what I've seen, this girl is like, ooh, scary, right? And so she ends up going on a tour. She's a tour guide for this place. And so eventually, by the end of her days, she ends up going and taking everything out of the register, putting it in her backpack. And so all of a sudden, she starts hearing noises in this place. And she eventually just kind of pokes her head out. She's like, what's going on? And so eventually, considering she starts to hear footsteps, she starts to hear, like, something coming. She decides to go and quickly put these two, like, cords together to turn on these lights coming from these from this hallway, and she sees nothing. She's like, okay, this is a little weird. All of a sudden, we have Gabriel, the booger man, just coming from the ceiling, dropping down, and grabbing this woman. And this woman is to be taken to this attic in this one home, where then Gabriel is to put on this, like, this trench coat, and is to put on, like, his clothes of choice. And eventually we have Gabriel coming through the radio talking to this woman, because we have little snippets, a little stuff where Gabriel's to seemingly say things on the radio, but it doesn't come off as prominent as now. So So I'm just like, at this point, I'm just like, okay, this movie is still so random. Where is all the connection here? But we're getting there. So all of a sudden, the next person who is to get Gotan is to be, I guess, this therapist. And I'm like, oh, okay, so is this going to be like Halloween? Is this going to be like Jamie Lee Curtis all over again? Uh, because eventually this seems so much like Halloween, it gets ridiculous. Where I'm just like, dude, this feels like a blatant copy and paste of like Halloween. Like, when are we gonna get because we already can prove that it seems like this Gabriel guy is seemingly bulletproof. Because I don't know how many, like, there's several people. He goes into a whole, like, police department in this movie, and all these cops can't get one freaking bullet in this guy for whatever reason. So, because this guy just circus acts through everybody, and they just cannot shoot this guy for goofy reasons. And plus, he's absurdly strong. Sure. Anyways, so now we have the next death. That is to start out with Dr. Florence Weaver. But here's the thing: we don't see like the whole transition of how like Weaver is kind of going through her house, the light is flickering, and all that stuff. Like, no, we just have kind of Madison kind of going through her day to day, going and starting her laundry up, and just going did 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 did, like, hey, what's gonna go up next? Oh, blood in the back of the head. Oh yeah, that's just another just yeah the blood, where she has to go and like she's like taking a towel to like try to like clean some of the blood up, but yeah, so Madison goes and does her laundry to all of a sudden see Dr. Florence Weaver from her uh from her washing machine, like where the actual washing machine is. We see Weaver, who's cowering in fear, waiting to get killed by Gabriel. And so now all of a sudden, the place of which that Madison is in, all of a sudden drastically changes to all of a sudden look like where Weaver is at, not where Madison is. And immediately once Madison is to say, like, oh, I'm frozen, like, I can't move, I'm like, okay, we figure this out. So, because Madison is along for the ride, and so Gabriel is going to kill this woman, and Madison is just there to watch. Sadly enough, she can't call out to this woman because this Madison is not really there. She's just watching on. So Gabriel goes and has to kill Dr. Weaver in an interesting way. And so he ends up finding one of her awards of excellence. Just a severely generic award for whatever reason that she got this from. And here's the thing. So this thing has these, like, this award has like this spike thing here, and then you have these like angel wings off to the side. And I'm like, so you have this spike thing here and then wings off to the side. I'm like, is this going to be this guy's like go-to weapon? But I'm like, please let this just be a one-off thing that you just kill this person with this award and then you're done. But no, this guy takes this award and like customizes it to be a blade for him to use for the rest of this movie. I'm like, oh my god, you couldn't have just found things every single time you killed somebody and killed them with that? Wow. Just, you gotta come up with a goofy weapon for these cats. So what ends up happening is this guy doesn't customize this award this time around. No, he just takes the heavy end of this award and just smacks her with it consistently and just brutally kills her. But then eventually he goes back where this woman is to be hung up by all these ropes. And Gabriel is to consistently tell this woman, don't you even try to like untie yourself. Don't even try. Don't do it. Like, you're going to regret it. So Gabriel then customizes and adjusts the award to where it looks much more like a knife. And so that's his weapon of choice that he uses on other things. So we then transition to a guy named Dr. Victor Fields. Because, like, it's slow to the crawl for these Detective Shaw to figure out what's going on and what is the connection here. Because Detective Shaw wants Dr. Weaver is to be dead. He ends up just taking every single book thing of cases that Dr. Weaver has done and is looking through every single thing to try to figure out who this killer could be. And I'm just like, man, that is going to take forever. You're never going to, like, by the time that you figure out who this killer is, he'll have probably killed 30 different people, and then he'll retire. Because, like, I guess they have to also showcase to you, like, hey, why is it in every slasher film? Why is it that all the detectives, like, can never be able to figure out who bad guy is in the movie because they go into, like, really scrutinizing things to eventually figure out who the killer is. And even when going through all these case files, I'm just like, I don't think they're going to be able to figure out any single scrap of this case. But eventually Detective Shaw is to find this one picture. And so he tells his one other detective, hey, like, could you age this up 30 years for me to, like, see, like, who this person is much older? And so the guy's like, okay, sure. So after okay, so let's tee it up. So so after the first, like, after Dr. Weaver had died, we just have, like, Madison do nothing. And so eventually when she is to be pulled into the scenario of the second murderer, or the second murder, then she ends up speaking up. Then she ends up going to the police afterwards and saying, like, hey, yeah, like, I think this guy is dead. Like, he's probably dead in this location. She ended up seeing this, like, super cup, like, neon light and some kind of background, so she knows where this guy is to have been living. So all of a sudden we have Dr. Victor Fields, who is calling one of his friends, and he's mentioning, like, well, it can't be a part of some simian case. It can't be that. Like, I don't know. Like, I think it's just a coincidence. It just feels like a random coincidence of things, right? So all of a sudden, this guy is to eventually go into his closet because he thought he heard something. And so nothing is really there. All of a sudden, it's like raining. And so he ends up going and taking a towel and kind of wiping down by his window because it's been raining out. And so I guess he closes his window. So this guy just goes off and just goes to sleep. And, like, it's just like nothing is really going down. So eventually Madison is in the bed with this guy, and then that's when Gabriel decides to strike. Just starts, like, just tearing through this guy like nobody's business. And again, there's nothing Madison can really do. But at least Madison is to clearly see this guy's face. And so we also have this moment or this thing where Madison is to eventually tell her stepsister, because she had been adopted when she was about around 8, and Madison is to talk to her stepsister and mention eventually when Sydney is to come back to see Madison because of her husband's death, and Madison, while have gotten injured by Derek and went to the hospital, her stepsister was the one to tell her that she had lost her baby. So an actual doctor, couldn't have been bothered to come in there and say, "Hey, I'm sorry, but you lost your child while you were in the hospital." I'm like, so her stepsister needed to tell her that information because the doctor couldn't, I guess, have been bothered to just say, hey, it looks like you're doing fine, even though, had a miscarriage. Because evidently Madison has had this pattern of consistent miscarriages, which is like, okay, that's weird, but then they have to also justify that as well. And so hence why Derek is immediately just assuming that Madison is not going to be able to give him a baby, and so this is just going to lead to yet another miscarriage, and coincidentally it does. So we also have that moment where Madison eventually tells Sydney that, hey, I was so tempted to leave Derek, but eventually I got pregnant, and that just made me want to stay. And so this girl knew that Derek was wrong for her, but she stayed because of the child, which I'm like, it's not a good reason, but I guess it was just well, she was pregnant and it was hard, whatever. Anyways, and she didn't know who to turn to. I don't know. Anyways, pushing on. So, so eventually so after the second killing, Madison is to go to this detective and tell him what it all happened, and maybe that she's having some psychic link to this killer from what had happened to her at her home. Because I think the killer did go and seemingly attack Madison, but it wasn't 100% clear about all that. That, eventually I think he ends up kind of, knocking her over or something like that. But, anyways, pushing on. So, that's not 100% clear. But anyways, so Madison is going to this detective and telling him all of where that this death had happened. And so the guy is like, well, okay, we'll have you come with us and we'll go to this location, and sure far enough, this other guy is to be dead. So all of a sudden, now that there has been more deaths happening, all of a sudden that is to start to just go okay, maybe Dr. Weaver has some connection with also this Dr. Victor character. And so that could possibly narrow things down. And plus these detectives are kind of combing through a lot more to try to narrow all this down. So eventually, next up, we have yet another doctor who is to eventually get the deal, the die, it's going to happen. There's a third doctor to be involved in this, so I'm like, okay, we're just going to keep going with his pattern here. There's not any kind of other kind of random stuff going on. But these 3 doctors are dying for whatever reason. So, but eventually I can understand, all these doctors have had some connection with Madison, which is connection to Gabriel, which is Halloween scenario. So, it's basically as if, Michael Myers went out of his way to kill his therapist in the Halloween movies. It's kind of like that, where like once he got out of the hospital, it's like, oh well, I'm going to go after my therapist, and then I'm going to eventually go after uh, everyone who is kind of involved with Madison one way or the other. So again, there's really nothing that really just that Madison can really do at this point whenever she's to go through these images. But this time around, it seems that Detective Shaw figures it out in the nick of time to eventually find this photo where both Dr. Florence Weaver, Dr. Vicar Fields, and Dr. Gregory had all done this one procedure called the Simeon. And so eventually he is to watch this video to just be like, oh, okay, I figured things out. So all of a sudden we have Detective Shaw, who of course tries to make it to Dr. Gregory, but of course he makes it too late. And I think Gregory ends up like dying in the shower or something. It doesn't. He dies in the bathroom, and so eventually Detective Shaw makes it there just in the nick of time to have this this Gabriel just really just outrunning Detective Shaw, to where Detective Shaw is consistently trying to chase after this thing. Like, it's leading through all these weird places and all these like underground things, and like this detective is having to just fall from off this fire escape to like smash in this dumpster to try to keep up the pace with Gabriel. And so like this detective is trying as best as he can to eventually get to Gabriel, but eventually it's just like, dude, you're not gonna get to this thing. And it's just like it goes through all these weird caverns and whatever, and like it just eventually just gets to where he loses this character, and Madison is trying to follow and try to see what's going on with Detective Shaw while this is all going on. So eventually it seems that people are to get certain kind of information, and so it seems that even Madison's sister is also starting to come away with certain kind of clips that Dr. Weaver has. And Madison, who, when eventually she goes back home, it seems like her mother also has some home videos to kind of clear things up, her adopted mother. So Madison eventually goes home to see her mother, who's in a wheelchair, and we don't know why she's in a wheelchair, because they didn't seem to clear that up anywhere in this movie, why she's in a wheelchair, or why she's just... Maybe she wasn't in... Maybe she was... Anyways. So, wheelchair? Yeah, they didn't answer that. I guess they didn't need to. So... So Madison is to eventually continue to talk with Gabriel, and she ends up finding out that this entity is to call itself Gabriel, and that Gabriel is to tell Madison, it's like why don't you remember me? Like, you should know who I am, and so on and so forth. So Madison goes back home to her stepmother to just be like, hey, like, I don't know, like, maybe you have the earliest memories, or maybe someone said something to you. Did anybody ever reference Gabriel to you? Or to say that I might have had a stepbrother that, did anybody mention that I had a brother, like, when you adopted me? And Madison's adopted mother, who is Jenny or Jean. I'm assuming Jean. She's like, well, if anything, you had a step, if you had a brother, if you had a biological brother, they would have wanted to put you in a home where both of you could find a home. I'm like, that's not exactly true. Like, I don't know how many times, like, uh, brothers and sisters and whatever had been separated. That's not a perfect thing. Like, that doesn't perfectly work out. I don't know what this woman knows. Or maybe maybe they Google researched it and like, oh no, every single brother and sister would find an equal home. That doesn't happen all the time. But anyways, so Madison is to eventually say it's like, well, like for some reason, like there is to be this thing haunting me that is be by the name of Gabriel. And Madison is like, oh, Gabriel? Like I haven't heard that name in a long time. So all of a sudden, Jean is to put up home videos, like just a ton of home videos coincidentally, where Madison is being freaking creepy. And we end up finding out that seemingly Gabriel is Madison's imaginary friend that she talks to as if no one is there. And so we also have at points in time in certain videos where Madison is taking phone calls from Gabriel, and supposedly Jean had mentioned that it seems that the more and more they started to be with Madison, to just, or they called her Maddie, to and originally her actual name was Emmy or Emily, yeah, her original name was Emily, and so eventually once Madison is to find out that her real name all along was Emily, they end up starting to look up stuff that had the connection of Emily, and so like Sydney is to also look up stuff tying to Emily, and eventually finds a whole bunch of stuff. So all of a sudden Madison is just kind of assuming or assessing that Gabriel is kind of her imaginary friend that is in her head that she can't control, obviously. Or that supposedly this Gabriel character can give her strength, supposedly. So, because what ends up happening is there is to be this flashback that she used to have about this birthday cake that it seems that Gabriel had taken like a thing of and just like, this is good. For all of a sudden, Madison to get the fall for that, and Madison is like, no, it wasn't me, it was Gabriel. And so all of a sudden, while her parents were sleeping, Gabriel called Madison to say, hey, like, you need to go and slice a thing of cake, like, and give it to your mother. Your mother will love it. And so Madison is like, okay, that sounds reasonable. So all of a sudden, Madison is to go and get this kitchen knife to cut this cake for her mother. And then all of a sudden, Gabriel is to take control of Madison and have Madison appear in front of her mother and father sleeping with this kitchen knife. And then Madison is just to get back control and just be in this scenario where all of a sudden she has this kitchen knife in front of her mother and father, to where, like, I'm assuming Gabriel was trying to just like, hey, like, we need to get rid of this family. Let's ditch this family. Let's get her out of here. So Madison remembers that and just like, whoa. So like Gabriel is technically having Madison do blackouts or just take control of her. And so there's something really going on here. So we also have Sydney, who ends up finding a videotape of her biological mother, who is much younger. And so her mother uh, ends up telling uh, this therapist or this doctor, it's like, well, like, you know what, I would have loved to taken care of my child, but like eventually I just, like, whatever this was, like, it seems like it's an abomination that I just can't take care of it, that it's just so all of a sudden now we're getting close to the actual reveal part. We're getting to the big, huge part of all this to eventually find out that Madison actually had a conjoined twin. And the conjoined twin was on the back of her head. And you can kind of see like arms, and you could see like body pieces and face and all this kind of stuff. And then they're like, whoa, ooh, yeah. Like, that's the part for me where I was just like, oh, that's the big reveal, golfers clap. But I was like, I figured that it was something like that because you have this guy, this killer, who's to be this like weird circus performer like person that can't just normally do things. Like, he can't just run normally, or he can't just do things normally. Like, when he ends up killing the guy in the bed, I was like, okay, that is the weirdest way for this person to move, to try and kill this person in this bed. This seems so weird. And then I started to put the pieces together. I'm like, well, why does this person have to weirdly move like this? And then immediately once they showed that, I'm like, aha. Like I already knew, like I already kind of assumed that Madison was the killer all along, but then they had to like spoon feed the crap out of us to eventually just show what's really going on here. So now we get the big footage, the big reveal that what they ended up doing was that it seems that they ended up finding out that both Madison and Gabriel could share a mind, to where if they're to show like a picture or something to Gabriel, Madison could answer for that. And so they're like, okay, that's really interesting. But they ended up also deciding that Gabriel was just becoming too hard or too difficult uh, to have them like deal with. So what they decided to do was they decided to try as much as possible to cut out the Gabriel part. But here's the thing, they also realized that they can't 100% cut off 100% of the Gabriel part, because then Madison would have died. So they had to leave a certain small percentage of Gabriel still in Madison. And eventually we have that RoboCop-like moment where eventually Gabriel came back to the surface simply because Derek going and smacking his wife against this wall woke up Gabriel completely. And every single miscarriage that Madison was to have was to supposedly help Gabriel like continue to live with inside Madison. But it took the big knock on the head to really just push Gabriel out into the fold, to where he could take much more control of Madison, and then all of a sudden go off on his killing spree and do whatever he wants, while Madison is still just along for the ride forcibly. So Sydney eventually finds all that out through all this footage. And so really they can't figure out who the killer is. They can't figure it out. So what they do doo-doo. So Detective Sean is to just take Madison in because his partner is to just tell Madison, it's like, hey, you know what? I think that we have gone on this long enough to think that there is some other killer at large. And and so Detective Sean's partner is just like, here's what we're really thinking is going on. So you have just lost your mind. And so, like, the people who tried to cure you before of your illness, like, evidently didn't do a good enough job. So your illness or whatever is wrong with you has come back, and now you're seeking revenge on all these doctors because they didn't cure you 100%. You're now going back into crazy mode. And so now you're seeking revenge on those doctors who couldn't help you when you were a kid. Or couldn't cure you completely because this sickness is back. The craziness is back within you. So they go and they put Madison into this prison and just be like, okay, like, I think she'll be fine. Toss her in there. So all of a sudden we just get these sequences of these most stereotypical women that I've ever seen in my life. We have all of a sudden this like disco freaking like woman that is to have this giant afro, and we have this like hillbilly woman, and I'm just like, man, they have the weirdest stereotypical women in this prison that makes no sense to me. And I was just appalled by the goofy looking stereotypical women in some part of this jail cell. And we also had to bizarrely focus weirdly on a woman who's taking a dump in this prison, like she's peeing, and we had to weirdly focus on that for whatever reason, because like you just see like this woman coming into the prison or coming into the cell, and you see the woman peeing, and then like we have to like focus on the woman peeing as if Madison is eventually gonna go and like be like, woman peeing, and then eventually we focus back on Madison after this woman finishes. And I'm just like, why did we have to focus on the woman peeing in the prison? That seemed weird to me. Like, is that a weird thing? That was weird. I don't know why they had to focus on that for camera angle's sake. That was weird. So now the big reveal, the whole enchilada. So now we really have to showcase Madison changing into Gabriel. We have to show that in this prison cell. It's like Ghost Rider all over again, where like Nicolas Cage is like holding on to the prison cell. He's like, let me out. And then all of a sudden, like, we have one of the guys who's like, now you're just a monkey in a cage. Like, and so, like, we have, like, these two girls who are all of a sudden having a problem with Madison. And so they just start beating the crap out of her. And then all of a sudden she ends up starting to change into Gabriel. And then so all of a sudden Gabriel just tears through all of these women. All of a sudden we have one cell guard, and Gabriel just tears through him too, and then grabs his keys, and then unlocks himself. And then now we just have the entire police precinct that Gabriel just have to magically, circus actingly just, like, bash through and just easily kill everybody. And, oh, we also forgot about another part, too. That the woman who was to be tied up in the ropes in some attic somewhere, she eventually unties herself to eventually fall through the floor, for us to find out that this woman is to be in the same house as Madison is. And immediately I'm just like, okay, this woman is to, of course, be Madison's biological mother. Like, of course it is. And they just now have to confirm that by having her fall through the freaking floor. And so Madison's mother is to be taken to the hospital, and that's of course where Gabriel wants to go, is to kill his biological mother and also go after Madison's stepsister for bonus points. So Madison goes through these police officers and kills every one of them off, even slices pretty good Shaw's partner, takes out Shaw pretty well too, to where like Shaw's partner is desperately calling for the National Guard because like this guy like is just like they couldn't have called an FBI agent. Like, is the National Guard the only thing of defense that? What about SWAT? What about like they could have called? I don't know, but whatever. So, uh, so Gabriel goes off to the hospital to go and try to kill his biological mother, and so Madison is just again there for the watch, but eventually she desperately wants to get control. She desperately wants to stop this from happening. So Sydney is to also figure out where Madison's biological mother is, and so she goes and sees her because Sydney knows that Gabriel is going for Madison's biological mother, and so Sydney is to try to call Shaw there, just be like, hey, like Gabriel is going for Madison's biological mother. Like, I know this is gonna happen because it's another revenge thing because Madison's biological mother gave up on her, and or Gabriel and Madison. And so, hey, like, she's going to be killed next. And Shaw's like, well, that's great and everything, but I've already got my hands full with Gabriel just all over the place in my precinct. So, yeah. So, uh, so Sydney is the only one true defendingly there to try to prevent Gabriel from making it to Madison's biological mother. Madison's mom. So, and plus, like, her adopted mother is just, like, safe at home, whatever. She's not going to die anytime soon. So, uh, so Madison is to try and take control because what is to happen next is Gabriel is to easily just chuck this hospital bed on top of Sydney, kind of keeping her pinned. And then Gabriel is just like, okay, like, I have a gun in hand, and guess what's going to happen, Sydney? It's like, goodbye, sis. And so Gabriel is to shoot Sydney and then go after his mother and choke and kill her. And so we're just like, okay, well, I think he got everybody. He killed everyone. But then all of a sudden, because Madison is just trying to, like, I want to try to get control. Like, this kind of feels like the Nicolas Cage scenario where he's trying to, like, do, like, read from some books and try to, like, control the Ghost Rider character. So this is kind of like shades of that. So all of a sudden, Gabriel's to think that he had killed everyone. He's like, I did it. I got everyone. Ha 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 ha. I'm done. But then all of a sudden, Madison is like, no, you didn't do anything in this room. You didn't kill anybody. And then all of a sudden, we end up really seeing that Gabriel had all of a sudden stopped at killing Madison's sister. And so now he's like frozen like that. And so Madison is like, well, guess what? I have turned the tables on you. You no longer have control. I'm going to keep you deep into my mind in this cell that you're to be stuck in. And, like, if you want to play mind games, like, well, I can play mind games too, because I've realized So this is kind of like the Fight Club scenario. Like that's the real reason why I think that reasonably they had the kind of like fight music or Fight Club music on consistently to tell you that Gabriel and Madison are the same person. Hence why they kept playing that Fight Club sounding music, because Madison and Gabriel are the same person. And so now we have the moment where reasonably Gabriel or Madison is to realize that, well, if you have this power, I have it too. If you're to be strong, I'm to be strong. And so at the end of all this, uh, Madison is to lock up in her mind Gabriel to where he can't come out. And so now that Madison has full range of her body again, and all of a sudden the bizarrish back part of her body supposedly vanishes forever, Madison is to go and with her brute strength go and lift up this hospital bed for her stepsister to get out of it. And then Madison is just like, hey, all this is over. Like, everything is to be done. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I wouldn't have easily wrapped up this movie like that. There is no way that I would have just said, like, I would have just had freaking, like, I would have put in Madison in protective care for the rest of her life. I don't care that it seems like everything is copacetic and everything is fine. No. This person, whether what body they were in or whichever, had murdered an entire precinct and had also killed a number of people. And are they just gonna like chuck all those bodies under the rug and just be fine with that? Really? Like, are they just gonna say that, oh, like it was Gabriel, it wasn't Madison? Technically, Gabriel's still in that head. Technically. Is it just going to be at some point where Madison is just going to fall asleep and all of a sudden Gabriel's going to wake up? Like, come on, movie. Like, you can't just wipe the slate clean once Madison is to seemingly, like, oh, I think I won. How are we sure? How are we 100% sure? And how are the detectives and whoever all 100% sure? That seems ludicrous to me. To think that this person isn't going to eventually be arrested and put under like 100, like put her in asylum, just say like, hey man, like we're gonna keep you on one, like we're gonna keep you on watch for the rest of your life. Like, it's sorry that you were to have like gone through all this, but still, like you're gonna have to like you're gonna be watched. Because at any second, you're all of a sudden going to turn into Gabriel again. I'm assuming there's going to be sequels probably of this, right? Weirdly. Even though the cat's out of the bag, it probably won't be as an exciting film as the first one was, if it ever was exciting. So yeah, I'm going to get out of here. I've talked for long enough. Hopefully I talked about every bit of this. I did it in a very roundabout way, because I mean roundabout way about, like, I didn't go into heavily minute-to-minute detail for every stitch of everything. So, I'm going to get out of here. Hope that everything was covered. But, goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.